Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents War for the Vampire Throne by Lyn South and Michael Anderle, narrated by Holly Adams. Chapter 1. SCI Training Center. Cat Troy closed her eyes and reached for the power. She felt it, hovering beyond her grasp, like someone was playing keep-away with a toy. She hesitated, drew a deep breath, reached for it again, and pulled. Magic surged into her, and it was far more powerful than she remembered ever having accessed before the dampening spell that had hidden her. It flowed through her, giving so much strength and power she was almost lightheaded. She opened her eyes. Bright light filled the training center, and energy crackled in her hands. The orange-red flames cupped in her palms should have scalded her, but she felt only a tickling warmth as the fire danced and flickered when she moved her hands. She glanced at Elle Barnes, the witch she and her team rescued from her brother Cain. Elle peered at her through the light, incredulous at the sight of the fire. "How does it feel?" Her voice was as breathless with excitement as if she were anticipating great sex. "Or chocolate." Elle's moods swung on a wide-arc pendulum influenced by midlife hormones, chocolate, or sex. She was a happy camper as long as she had access to one of the latter two. "It feels good." Cat flexed her fingers, and the light grew brighter. It moved in response to her will, and more power coiled within, waiting for her to unleash it. She had never felt so alive, so strong. "It's pliable. I can shape it, mold it. It's part of me, but also separate. It's weird." "Can you control it?" Allie Barnes sat behind a laptop on the table, taking notes on the proceedings as Cat practiced her newly restored magic. Cat considered the question for a moment, then concentrated on the power and willed it to do her bidding. She moved her hands in front of her, one over the other, until the energy smoothed into a ball. As she spread her fingers and stretched her arms wide, the ball of light stretched with her like it was elastic. She thrust her arms forward, and it exploded outward into a laser beam. The light hit the heavy punching bag hanging from the ceiling and blew it into the wall, creating a dent in the brick from the impact. The smell of burned vinyl and dust filled the air. Cat's hands tingled from the release of power, and she stared at them in wonder. "Wow." Awe laced Elle's voice. "Just wow." Cat grinned as the power thrummed through her veins. She felt more alive than she had in centuries. She felt invincible. "I guess that answers the control question." "No, it doesn't." Allie pushed her chair back from the table and walked over to them. "Did you intend to explode the bag or burn a hole in it? Intention is everything, especially when a skill is new." Elle cocked her head and considered her cousin's words. "True. The ancestors usually throttle a baby witch's power for a few years until they trust the witch's or wizard's trustworthiness. It would make sense for them to limit you to making feathers float or turning teacups into toads or some other low-level magic for a while. This?" She gestured at Cat's body, which was still thrumming with power. "This is something else entirely." Cat's gaze flicked from the disintegrated punching bag to the wall and back to Elle. The witch's concerns struck a chord deep inside her. It frightened her. She knew the ancestors were powerful. They had the juice to immediately dial her powers up to super strength when they switched them back on, but they had been adamant about not fully restoring her powers until she proved herself. As Elle said, they were taking a risk by allowing her access to such powerful magic. A tiny doubt sprouted inside Cat, like a seedling that had poked its first tender green shoots through the soil. What if she wasn't capable of mastering all of it? Would the ancestors regret restoring her magic? What if they took it all away again at the worst possible moment? Damn it! She had no control over the ancestors or what they might do. She tried to shake off the insecurity and concentrated on what she could control. For whatever reason, whether by the ancestors' designs or a cosmic paranormal fluke, immense power was hers now. She had a responsibility to focus and control it. "I can do this," she said aloud as if to convince herself. She looked at the witches, and they looked back at her, dubious, but with the tiniest glimmer of hope in their eyes. "I don't know what's going on, but maybe the ancestors said how I used this magic was part of the test. Maybe that's why they put it in me and have let me tap into it. I need to figure out what they want me to do with it." "I hope you're right." Elle looped an arm around her cousin's neck. Allie shook her head, unconvinced. "Even before your powers were locked away, there were limits to your witch side, right? I mean, since you are a vamp, the ancestors wouldn't let you channel all of their power like they would a full-blood witch." She glanced from Elle to Kat, and back at Elle. "Would they?" Elle sighed and searched Kat's eyes for a moment before she answered. "That's a good question. What kind of magic did you have before Millie cast the dampening spell on your magic and memory?" Kat moved to the large sofa in the middle of the room and sat, curling her legs under her. Allie sat in one corner with her laptop precariously balanced on her knees, and Elle sat in the other with her long legs stretched out in front of her. "I was powerful. I came from a long line of seers who served in the temple of Athena. I was in training to become a priestess when the vamp turned me." "What kind of things could you do? Magically speaking, I mean." Allie's fingers flew over the keyboard as she took notes. "I could foresee the future. The temple also trained me in the healing arts. I could concoct potions and brew herbal remedies. I was pretty good at defensive spells of protection, like warding a place so enemies couldn't enter." "What about offensive spells?" Elle asked. "Could you fight with magic?" Kat nodded. "I could, but it wasn't encouraged in the temple. We certainly never shot fire bolts from our hands. We weren't elemental witches." "No elemental magic at all, huh?" Elle's gaze stayed glued to Kat's hands, and she watched them intently as she spoke. Kat shook her head. "No, I could cast spells to light candles or campfires, but I couldn't make fire burn out of nothing or make the wind blow or influence the weather." "Interesting." Allie nodded, more likely because she was trying to figure things out than an acknowledgement that she knew what was going on. "So you were never able to do that before?" She waved at the pile of ashes that used to be the punching bag. Kat glanced in the direction, then back at Allie and Elle. "As I said, I've never been a laser cannon. The answer is no." She chuckled. "I was never able to do that before." "How about transfiguration? Could you change inanimate objects from one form to another? How about shapeshifting? Could you change into animals or other people?" Allie typed so fast that Kat wondered whether it could be considered a superpower. "No and no. It would be interesting to see if I can now." The door to the training center swung open, and Ruby Broussard, Kat's familiar and best friend, strode into the room. She looked elegant in her tailored black suit, white blouse, and expensive designer slingback pumps. Her normally casual jet-black hair was in a sleek bun. "Hey, what's going on in here?" Ruby's questioning look encompassed all three women. "I thought you were working on Kat's magic. Looks like you're taking a coffee break to me." She glanced at the cardboard tray filled with expensive designer coffee from the Milford Mug Coffee Cafe. "Since the designated caffeine bearer for today just arrived, and the coffee break hasn't started, why are the three of you sitting on your asses?" "We've been working for the last 2 hours." Elle sighed and reached for the coffee cup with her name on it. caramel macchiato, double sweet. Then she pointed at the pile of ashes on the floor. Cat had an unexpected display of power. We're in the middle of a debrief. Ruby's jaw dropped and she stared at the ashes. Damn, girl! What the hell happened? Cat turned into a fire-breathing dragon. That's what happened. Allie's expression was still a little shell-shocked. Cat accepted a large Nutella latte from Ruby. It was her secret indulgence. The brew had cooled enough in transit to make it drinkable. I'm not a dragon. I didn't breathe fire or anything. I'm more like a laser cannon. Magic exploded out of me. Allie and Al exchanged looks with Ruby, who took a long drink of her coffee before she answered. Can you do it again? Her eyes went wide with excitement, and she looked like a kid waiting for fireworks to blast out of Cat's fingertips. Ruby set her satchel on the table and sauntered to another punching bag lying on the floor. With a flick of her wrist, she brought the bag upright, and it hovered in the air. A moment later, it clipped itself to the chain hanging from the ceiling. Ruby sat on the couch beside Allie and gestured at the bag. Okay, girl, let's see what you got. Make that one explode too, please. Allie raised her hand with a pointed look at Cat. We've already seen what happens when you make the bag blow up. Try for some control. Focus on the center of the bag and burn a hole in it. Cat took a sip of coffee and set the cup down. She positioned herself far enough from the bag that debris wouldn't shower her if it exploded. She closed her eyes and drew a deep breath, reaching for the magic inside her. She imagined the energy as a small dot of light from a laser pointer instead of a wrecking ball. It felt easier this time. Cat thought she knew what to expect. She willed the magic into her hands and let the power flow out of her. A moment later, red energy rolled into a little ball in her palms. She glanced at Ruby, who leaned forward in rapt attention, along with Allie and Elle. Ready? The ball of light fluctuated. It grew from the little ball into a cantaloupe-sized sphere, then down to a tennis ball size. Damn, girl, Ruby muttered. You sure you can control that shit? I'd rather not get disintegrated today. I have an appointment at the hair salon later that took me ages to book. I can control it. Cat's smile was shaky as she played with the fire, letting it dance from one hand to the other, almost like she was juggling balls instead of deadly energy. She needed to keep convincing herself that she could regulate the magic within her. Okay, Miss Smarty Pants. Elle nodded. This time, control the amount of force you use. Don't send the bag into the wall. Let's see if you can choose a smaller size and lob that puppy at the punching bag like an underhanded softball pitch. Nice and easy. Cat drew a deep breath and focused her attention on the energy ball. She visualized it hitting the bag and burning a clean hole in its center, but not hitting it so violently it would blow a hole in the wall. She gently tossed the ball. It sailed through the air and hit the bag dead center. The bag went up in flames and exploded into a cloud of dust, covering everyone in the room in a fine film of gray powder. Wow! Ruby leaped to her feet and did a little jig that looked more like she was trying to shake the ashes from her hair. That was impressive. Allie's jaw dropped, but it didn't look like an expression meant to agree with Ruby about the awesomeness of Cat's new powers. It looked more like fear and apprehension. No, that was more frightening than impressive. Cat has never had elemental magic before. You weren't supposed to blow up the bag again. The lack of control is concerning. Not to mention, why would the ancestors give Cat more power than she can handle right now? Elle frowned in thought. A few weeks ago, they hated her because she's a vampire-witch hybrid. Allie nodded in enthusiastic agreement. I think the exact word they used to describe our fearless leader was abomination, wasn't it? Cat glanced sideways at the witch. It's a creative and little-used insult. Shakespeare would be proud. Fun fact, some of the best insults in his plays came from me. I even performed in one of his plays, disguised as a boy, of course. They didn't let women act in plays back then. Elle laughed. No way. Which ones? This I've got to hear. Kat cleared her throat and stood upright in an exaggerated, erect posture like she might have done on the stage of the Globe Theatre. Thou art a base, proud, shallow, beggarly, three-suited, 100-pound, filthy worsted-stocking knave, a lily-livered, action-taking, whoreson, glass-gazing, super-serviceable, finical rogue, one-trunk inheriting slave, one that wouldst be a bawd in way of good service, and art nothing but the composition of a knave, beggar, coward, pander, and the son and heir of a mongrel bitch. She smiled broadly, expecting their applause, but met with stares and open mouths. She frowned at them. Don't tell me you've never seen King Lear. The witches burst into hysterical laughter until they wiped away tears as they streamed down their cheeks. Even Ruby cracked a smile because their laughter was contagious. Kat, however, was not amused. A super-serviceable, finical rogue? Allie gasped, trying to catch her breath. Oh, no, that's not the best one. I'm stuck on lily-livered, action-taking whoreson. Kat huffed and pointed an accusatory finger at the pair. The two of you are in need of some culture. By the way, thanks for reminding me your ancestors think I'm an abomination. Very comforting. Any time, Clementine. Allie smiled sweetly in response. The ancestors' judgment had been swift and harsh. When they summoned the Barnes ancestors to request help to restore Kat's magic, they got more than they bargained for, because it seemed every witch's ancestor in existence showed up, and they all had something to say about Kat's status with them as persona non grata. They made it clear they weren't inclined to help Kat in any way, and, if anything, they would be happy if she burst into flames the same way the punching bags did. Ruby motioned Kat closer, and, without touching her, began moving her hands all around Kat's body. She closed her eyes as she concentrated. A moment later, Allie and Elle joined Ruby. The three moved slowly and deliberately, scanning her with outstretched hands as they walked in a slow circle around her. Kat closed her eyes and willed herself to relax. She hoped that whatever they might sense would shed light on what was going on inside her. Allie mumbled something in Latin that Kat couldn't quite make out, and she opened one eye to sneak a glance at her. Allie's frown suggested the witch was either confused or frustrated. Kat peeked at Elle, then at Ruby as they passed before her. They shared the same confused look, as though Allie's expression had been copied and pasted on their faces. The three stopped at the same time and opened their eyes. Elle was the first one to speak. Something isn't right. The power I sense doesn't feel like the ancestors' kind of energy. Ruby moved to stand next to Elle with an appraising look at Kat. Allie cut in. Given the ancestors' batshit crazy response to our summoning, an argument could be made their response was logical and measured given that they hate Kat's guts. It could have gone much worse. They seemed on the verge of blasting her into another realm. Elle gestured from Kat's head to her shoulders and down her arm in a slow, flowing motion. She kept frowning like she couldn't quite believe, or trust, what she felt. Which makes it 1,000,000 times weirder that they would give her laser cannon powers after only the first trial. The question becomes, are these powers from the ancestors? Or somewhere else? Ruby nodded in agreement. If these new powers are from the ancestors, their doomsday prophecy makes sense. They would need to give her extra mojo to unite the factions. If the powers are from somewhere else, what does that mean? Cat figured the ancestors had to be smashed on some potent witch's brew when they decided her destiny was to save the vampire, witch, and werewolf factions from possible extinction by uniting them. It was a nice idea in theory, but it would take more than one person to achieve such a feat, especially since the three factions hadn't been on each other's holiday greeting cards lists for centuries. I have access to more power, more magic than I've ever had before. Cat folded her arms. Regardless of where it came from, it makes sense to use it to our advantage, right? Cat held out her hands and summoned the power. It flickered to life like a faulty fluorescent light, steadied, and glowed brightly. A satisfied smile tugged up the corners of her mouth. Allie half shrugged, apparently not convinced. Harnessing this power and finding ways to increase its strength and range will help us win the coming war. She crossed her arms and studied Cat with the practiced eye of a doctor looking for clues to some mysterious disease. Until we figure out where this power is coming from, we can't be sure it won't come with strings attached. We can't be sure if it's stable or will fizzle out at the wrong moment, like in the heat of battle. Ruby shrugged. I think Allie's right. We need to look before leaping too far with these new powers. With whatever this darkness is that's about to slap us down, more power is a good thing, right? The more powerful Cat is, the better our chances of winning. Elle chewed on her bottom lip with a thoughtful expression. She walked to the remnants of the punching bags, which now lay in a smoldering heap on the floor. She grabbed a fistful of ash, let it sift through her fingers, looked at Cat, and spoke with a touch of awe. We could argue for years about the pros and cons of how Cat should use these new powers. But one thing is for sure. Wherever this magic comes from, it's going to change everything. Outside Chicago, Illinois. The landscape in rural northwest Illinois rarely changed. There were always crops in the fields, whether corn, soybeans, sorghum, or winter wheat. Motorcycle riders always rumbled around off-road dirt tracks and gravel roads. The large military complex near the Mississippi River was always busy with soldiers training, equipment being repaired and tested, and monitoring supernatural activity all around the world. Major Barry Lawrence had flown into the Rockford International Airport at 00:30 on a Monday morning and rented a car. As he drove west to get to the SCI Training Center, he watched the scenery change from urban to industrial to farmlands. He stopped for coffee and a bio break twice, and was on his third cup of coffee, his guilty pleasure, a white chocolate mocha with extra whipped cream, when his phone rang. He recognized the number. It was his boss, Colonel Sheila Baxter. He swore and hit the speaker button. "Morning, ma'am. I'm on my way to the—" "Barry, we have a problem." Baxter's voice was tense and clipped. Barry frowned. What kind of problem? He resisted the urge to slam his hand against the steering wheel in frustration. If Baxter was already wound up this early in the morning, it didn't bode well for him. It usually meant that some supernatural case had gone south and she was looking for someone to blame. "I can't cut a deal for those Isaacson idiots and Will Evans." Baxter sighed. "I pulled every string I could to get them out of jail without revealing I was the one behind the requests. Since they were charged with kidnapping the werewolf's grande dame, and she has influential friends everywhere, the political climate in the Pentagon is shifting. All of my contacts have gone dark. Nobody will help me." "Not returning your calls, huh?" "Not even their secretaries are calling me back. They've stonewalled me at every turn. All of a sudden, everyone over there is now falling in line with the supernatural rights or human rights, or entirely clamming up. It's infuriating." Barry sighed and rubbed his temples. The pastoral scenery outside his window blurred, and he realized his foot was heavy on the gas. He eased up as he approached a known speed trap at a small grove of trees near an intersection. The local county sheriff had stopped him once for speeding, but Barry used the excuse he was responding to a supernatural crisis and walked away with only a warning. He could probably get away with it as often as he wanted, but SCI activities had already strained relations with the locals. He didn't want to give anyone any more reason to dislike them or distrust the team.
"What do you want me to do about this, ma'am? If pulling strings isn't working for you, what makes you think anyone at the Pentagon will move if I ask them?"
There was a long silence on the other end of the call. "We have to go around the big brass on this one, Barry."
"Ma'am, I don't understand."
"Oh, I think you do. After the SCI team rescued the werewolf's grande dame, Professor Catherine Troy's influence and connections began to grow. She's starting to move in the decision-makers' circles, the ones who can make decisions about supernaturals
and the ones who can make decisions about commuting the sentences for Evans and the Isaacsons."
Now you're getting it. You're in the perfect position to work behind the scenes on Cat Troy. Find out what she knows about the Hunter Network, and how we can convince her to work with us instead of that werewolf she's cozying up to. He gritted his teeth.
Grande Dame Freya Jonasson is the oldest, strongest werewolf in the world. She is so influential and politically savvy that her connections have connections. One word could make or break the SCI and the entire military. She's not a werewolf to use, ma'am. She is a werewolf to respect and fear.
You're starting to sound like those turncoats who think we should treat supernaturals like humans. Barry knew he had to tread lightly. Being a double agent and keeping the trust of both sides was a delicate balancing act. Cat Troy was still wary of him, and he couldn't afford to make Baxter think that he was anything but loyal to her.
"I'm acknowledging the facts, ma'am. If you want to free Will Evans and the Isaacsons, we have to go about it the right way. One misstep at the Grande Dame and we'd be done."
"Fine." Baxter's tone sharpened. "How do you propose we go about this? Got any ideas?" He thought for a moment. Political machinations aside, Cat and her team were interested in justice and protecting innocents, human and supernatural. He could use those principles to his advantage if he thought it through carefully.
"Let me think about it for a day and I'll get back to you. If I can find a way to use the SCI team and their investigative skills, we might get some traction."
Baxter sighed. "You'd better not let me down, Lawrence. We're running out of time before the political environment goes completely against us." She hung up before he could reply. Chapter 2. Chicago, Illinois. Wannabe Chicago Vampire Crime Boss Found Dead. Written by Valerie K. Published 5:08 a.m. Internet News of the Day, Wednesday, March 15th. Vampire Nero McCool, approximately 326 years old, was found dead in a vampire history exhibit at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. McCool, whose real name is unknown, had allegedly sought to control the vampire faction commanded by nefarious rogue vampire Cain Abrams until his execution-style murder several months ago. This is a developing story. More details to follow. Dawson Tucker gripped the steering wheel of his beat-up sedan until his knuckles ached. He peered sideways at Jasmine Palou, who sat in the passenger seat beside him, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She had read aloud the news item about McCool posted to the internet. In the back seat, fellow Supernatural Criminal Investigations team member Billy Morgan sat staring out the window at rain-slicked Lakeshore Drive. when Tuck glanced at Billy in the rearview mirror.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?